Okay, so tonight's shir has been sponsored by Mira Ayala Rub, who lives in Washington, and she sponsored it in memory of Andrew Ansel Forsyth, who was the brother of a friend of mine and the others here, Isaac Ansel Forsyth, and the son of his mother, Jane, who are both listeners. And Andrew was a very special person in his short life. He had many challenges, but he influenced many people around him, and especially with the idea of simcha in the face of adversity. So it should be Le'ilui Nishmoso, and for the Hatzlacha of Me'ira Ayala and all things, and also for Isaac and his mother. Okay, so we're back to the Avodas HaParsha here. We're going to be dipping into the Shem MiShmuel. Last year I gave Shurim every week on the Shem MiShmuel. But here we go back there, and it's interesting. This parsha is my bar mitzvah parsha, for what it is. Thank you. So it's got many different action-packed sections to it. Right? We have the lighting of the menorah. We have the traveling of Am Yisrael. We have Miriam and Aaron, and the whole discussion about Moshe and the Tzaras. We have Pesach Sheni. A ton of things in here. I want to focus on the one that at least I felt I hardly noticed because it doesn't seem so exciting. It's kind of a carryover from last week's Parsha, which is good because we didn't have a shir last week on Parshas Naso. So we're going to tie the two together, and it has to do with this dedication of the Leviim. Okay, the dedication of the Leviim. We had seen, right, before, right, in Parshas Naso, and even at the end of Bamidbar, we spoke about Kahas, the family of the Leviim called Bnei Kahas, and their duties, Gershon, Merari. And now the Leviim are brought to Aaron HaKohen. Okay, the Leviim are brought, so to speak, given to Aaron, as it says in the Psukim, and they have to go through a special tahara process. Now it's interesting that, like I said, this ties into Naso, but this is going to tie into Shlach, also, and even into Korach. Right? All the events here are going to be related to all of this, because let's remember that Korach was a Levi. They removed all the hair from themselves. They had to shave all their hair off, right? And to be matayar themselves, bring a certain korban. And now, right, they would come and Aaron picked them up. Okay, what's called a tnufa. We recognize this from the korban omer that we had, right? Powerlifting, right? So this is the korban. When you bring the korban omer, you bring the tnufa, you raise it up. You wave it, right? In the old Chumash, they called it a wave offering, I think, a korban tnufa. And it says three times that the lashon of tnufa, of raising up, in the description here of Aaron and the Leviim. Okay, it says, Vehinifes haLeviim, that's one. Tnufa lifnei Hashem, that's two, Meis b'nei Yisrael. And then, right, later on, a couple psukim later, V'amaratos haLevim lifnei Aaron v'lifnei Bonov, ve'inafta osam tnufa laHashem. Right, so we have these three tnufas. Rashi says, why three? He says because there are three families in the Leviim. So he says that the first is for Bnei Kahas, right? This idea that Aaron had to somehow raise up Bnei Kahas. Now, obviously, like we say, it wasn't weightlifting. He must be doing something to the Leviim by lifting them up. Something must be accomplished. And that's Bnei Kahas. They came first. They have this particularly honorable position because they were the ones who carried the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Aron, the Shulchan. That's the children of Kahas, that family within Levi. The second is Bnei Gershon, right? It says there, Tnufa laHashem, because they also, right, dealt with the holy parts of the Mishkan, the Urios, the special curtains that were woven, right, the krosim, the different hooks that held things together. And the krosim were seen inside the Kodesh Kadoshim. The Urios, the curtains which made up the Beis HaMikdash, were also seen inside the Kodesh Kadoshim. The Kodesh Kadoshim was made up of walls of the Mishkan, just like anything else, which were curtains. It was just sectioned off. So therefore, Bnei Gershon gets something important. Just opening parentheses a second, I saw a beautiful thing from Rav Bergman, Rav Shach's son-in-law. He has a little book about the development of Torah Sheba'al Peh, and he says, if you're saying like the korbanos in the morning, you'll notice a phrase will say something korban, it's ne'echolin lifnim min hakloim, that it's eaten inside the kloim. What are kloim? Curtains, right? It has to be eaten within the curtains. Now, he says, the Mishkan had curtains, but after that, we had a Bayis Rishon for hundreds of years. We had a Bayis Sheni for hundreds of years. Those were made up of walls. He says, this shows you that the formulation there of the Mishnah and the Brises, these things, they come all the way from the time of the Mishkan. And that remained, right? In other words, then you transfer the location from Lifnim Min HaKloim to wherever it is in the Beis HaMikdash, where that's old. And last, but not least, but last comes B'nai Merari. Okay, B'nai Merari, who are going to be an important part of our discussion tonight, they would carry the beams. They would carry like the solid wooden parts of the Mishkan, which seems to put them in a lower ranking state. Okay, now the question which is asked really by the Shem MiShmuel's father, the Avnei Nezer, was the son-in-law of the Kotzker Rebbe, is why do they have to be divided up into Aaron lifting up this family, Aaron lifting up that family, Aaron lifting up that family, right? It's they're Leviim. They're all Leviim, and in fact, the most important avoda that the Leviim have is Shira, is song, right? That's Avodas, it's called. That song, and all the families of the Leviim participated in the song. Okay, so there is that unifies them. Why separate them in these ways? So we'll start with a piece of Shem MiShmuel from Behaaloscha, and then we'll go back to the piece in Noso that he's referring to himself. So he tells us like this. He says, the question is, right, why should we have Lama Chilkon HaKosuv? Why did the Torah subdivide them and not include them all? Just like in the rest of the Parsha, they're simply referred to as HaLeviim. The Leviim, there's a Shevet Levi. So he says like this. In Parshas Noso, you note a strange thing. We say at the end of Bamidbar, Noso es rosh b'nei Kahos, raise up the head of the children of Kahos. Parshas Noso starts with, Noso es rosh b'nei Gershon gam hem, raise up the heads of b'nei Gershon, them as well. We don't find any lifting of the head of Merari. Why? Right? Why should Merari not have his head lifted up, so to speak, especially because the entire Jewish people gets that same phrase at different times, right? We have Kisisa es Rosh B'nai Yisrael. When B'nai Yisrael are counted, it's called Nesias Rosh for everyone. Why would B'nai Merari be different or somewhat less than the simplest of all Jews that are included in all of Am Yisrael? So, he explains like this. It's based in the Medrash that says each of these families of the Leviim had a particular property that they were meant to transmit to Am Yisrael. Okay? In other words, Leviim, when they were doing their avoda, they're supposed to be transmitting something into Am Yisrael. Just like the Kohen, that's the most obvious, when he does Birkas Kohanim, he's sending that bracha into Am Yisrael. The Leviim were supposed to be influencing Am Yisrael as well. Kahos, right, he is the power of Torah. The fact that he carries the Aron HaKodesh, that represents the power of Torah. And therefore, that's something which is very lofty. When he is assigned the idea of carrying the Aron HaKodesh, which translates into influencing Am Yisrael with the power of Torah, giving them strength with that, his head is raised up. If Gershon, so Gershon, it says, they come, he was the oldest of the brothers. He was the Bechor, he was the firstborn. So what he's transmitting into Am Yisrael is our identity as Hashem's firstborn. B'ni Bechori Yisrael. HaKadosh Baruch Hu identified at the beginning of Yetzias Mitzrayim, Am Yisrael are my firstborn son. The Maharal points out, a firstborn son, there can only be one. Right? That's why Am Yisrael is not just called a son of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but the firstborn son. Because there's only one Bechor. And this is something which brings to the self-esteem of Am Yisrael. It's very powerful. So once again, they're raised up. But the power of B'nai Merari is related to his name. When we look at the name Merari, we see the word mar, bitter. He says, because what Merari took care of, to udas B'nai Merari, oisa lahachnis b'Yisrael, koach is mamerus hanefesh. He said, that involves the idea of self-examination and sometimes a sense of bitterness at things going wrong. And that's a very important power that we have to have. So it shouldn't be ish kol hayosher be'enov, that everybody thinks I'm doing great, or whatever I decide to do is the best way to do things. We need this sense. Now, it's very interesting, it uses the word bitter. There's a famous teaching, I think it was from Rav Shlomo Karliner, if not from the first Karliner Rebbe Baron. He said, what's the difference between atzvus and merirus, between sadness and bitterness? He said, when a person's sad, or what we would call depressed, just wants to sleep. When a person is bitter, he wants to do something to change. He's on fire. The bitterness means this isn't the way it's supposed to be, and he's energized. Sadness is negative. It stops us from doing avoda. Merirus, in the right measure, can be a powerful motivator. But it certainly doesn't have the idea of Nesius Rosh, of picking up the head, because his work is done in a different area, in a different level, in the level of looking at things sometimes when they're down and how to fix them. It's a different specialty. Okay, so therefore he says, why did Aaron have to pick up each of them separately? Because you got to understand, every midah has its positive side and its negative side. He says it's true. Nesius Rosh Ba'avoda, the idea of feeling proud of being a Jew, proud of being able to serve Hashem, proud of the fact that he gave us our Torah, that we're his nation, great. He says, but it needs to be protected. You have to be sure that it doesn't lead to anger and to arrogance, all of which can come from those things. Okay? He says, therefore, right, the Torah has to be watched over, because the person who's a Baal Torah, he can become arrogant. That's definitely one of the dangers. You know, we just sing about on Shavuos, nothing greater in the world than Torah. And if somebody knows Torah, he translates that into nothing greater in the world than me. And then, you know, to someone who doesn't have his level of Torah, he can look down on them. It can also lead to anger. What's interesting, in other words, there's an idea, it's very strange to people sometimes. There's a positive thing called rischa da'oraisa. It means like the burning fire of Torah, almost the anger of Torah, which is supposed to typify a Jewish beis medrash, that it's not like a university library, right? It's not supposed to be silent. You're supposed to have people yelling, doing, etc. And Batei Medrash were proud sometime of their rischa d'oraisa. Moshe Shapira, so just mentioned him. So he said his father had learned in Telz in Lithuania, and his father said in Telz they were very proud of their rischa d'oraisa. And he said at one point he saw two of the Rebbeim arguing, and one of them grabbed the other one's beard, like, and gave it a schlep in the argument. Like it was to that extent. Okay, so he said that rischa is good when it's applied in Torah, but it's inside of you, it's burning. If it's not channeled in Torah, it can end up, you know, schlepping the beard of somebody in the wrong way. Okay, so you got to keep a lid on it in the right way and to use it. Now, the midah of Merari, which is that midah of bitterness in looking at things that aren't as they should be, taking an honest look at our mistakes, doing those things, also can be very good, but it's like medicine. It can be very dangerous. If you have too much of it, it leads you to despair and to sadness. So this was the task of Aaron HaKohen. He took each of these families and he raised them up so that their midah would be transmitted to Am Yisrael in the positive sense and not in the negative sense. Each of those three. Okay, so that's why you need a different tnufa for each of them. That is what he said here in Behaaloscha. Now he referred in the beginning, he said,
Was there a different tefillah for each one?
Was there a different tefillah? In other words, Aaron picked up each one separately. The nature of the tnufa itself wasn't different. It's kind of like the korbanos and Nesim that we just read in the last week's Parsha. Everybody asked, why couldn't they just say all 12 Nesim brought this korban? Because each one was different because of the kavanas halev. So when Aaron picked up Bnei Kahos, he was protecting their koach of Torah, that it should be positive and it shouldn't get into the arrogance and anger. When he picked up Bnei Gershon, right, the idea of Bnei Bechari Yisrael, but to be careful, right, that idea, he says a person who has yichus oftentimes lacks patience. It's a very interesting thing. He doesn't bear other people because he feels he's royal somehow, and he doesn't want to, have patience with other people. And Merari, he had to pick up having the kavanah that you shouldn't fall into sadness. So it's in the heart, just like the same way our words of Shemoneh Esrei are the same every day. But the Ramchal says you have to view them like coals. If you have coals, if you blow on them, each time you blow on them, the flames come up in different shapes and different colors. So that's the interaction between doing the same physical action. You're putting your finger on one of our greatest challenges in Yiddishkeit, because so many times we have to do the same thing. Sukkos, you take lulav and esrog every day. I did it yesterday. I do it today. I'm going to do it tomorrow. But it's supposed to be different every time. So that's what we have there.
Just a question.
Please.
Was the tenufa an actual physical lifting?
It was, yeah. And they say that Aaron obviously was...
How high did it
How high did they pick him up?
Is that fall off the ground, just 6 feet off the ground?
I don't know. It's like a kinyan, or if it's you got to...
3 spots?
Yeah, you got to make sure that you raise him. I don't know. But clearly Aaron was having strength that was not from the natural. Okay, so he refers back. Yeah, please.
So we know that Moshe had to lift those columns,
The boards of the Mishkan.
So there was a miraculous idea that he was able to lift it and
Right.
make the Mishkan. So it could be the same thing here with Aaron, with the Bikurim.
Correct.
They had to lift it up, and each one was different, and he could have had the special.
It seems clear there that this was not natural, because it's interesting. We'll see Korach later on with Korach. He ended up complaining to his wife about this. He said, "You see, Aaron picked me up and threw me like a bag of garbage." Is the way he described it. That was, he viewed it as this very dishonorable thing. That here Aaron picks him up and is shaking him like a lulav, and that was part of what got him angry because of his mindset. So here in Parshas Noso, he addressed the same thing, where he talked about the idea of Kahas being connected the power of Torah, Gershon being connected the power of this idea of B'nai B'chari Yisrael, and Merari being the power of the merirus, the bitterness, and the fixing up. Now here he takes a slightly different tack, which explains something very powerful. He says, in Judaism we have a concept of havdalah, of separation, right? We do it every Motzei Shabbos, and we give a list of havdahs. Ben Kodesh L'chol, Ben Or L'choshech, Ben Yisrael L'Amim, Ben Yom HaShvi L'Sheshes Me'amaseh. And we have divisions within Am Yisrael. We have Kohanim, Leviim, Yisraelim. And it's so important to understand Havdalah in Judaism, that our Havdalah is not just to separate from, but it's separating in order to connect. Listen to how he explains it. He says, Havdalah, for example, separating Am Yisrael from the nations of the world, separating Shevet HaLevi from Yisrael, separating the Kohanim from the rest of Shevet HaLevi. Now he says, everything which is separated off more has to raise up that from which it was separated. Meaning the Kohanim are supposed to elevate the Leviim. The Leviim are supposed to elevate the rest of Am Yisrael. Am Yisrael is supposed to elevate the rest of the nations of the world. Okay? He says this is how it goes. Because, and so too, he says Shabbos is separated from the 6 days of the week, but it's supposed to affect the 6 days of the week, elevate them. Right? He says Shabbos is an emtsoi between Olam Hazeh and Olam Haba. Right? Olam Hazeh being represented by the 6 days of the week. Olam Haba being represented by Shabbos Me'ein Olam Haba. So he says Shabbos then is able to connect your week of Olam Hazeh and give it a shaychus v'tziruf of Olam Hazeh Olam Haba. To have a ha'ara, to have a light of Olam Haba. Okay, so that's with Shabbos. Now he says Am Yisrael and the nations. He says be'emtzos Yisrael, by means of Am Yisrael, yish gam le'umos achiza b'tzad ma b'kedusha. Even now, nations of the world can have an achiza, a grasp, a connection to kedusha, right? Like this Hashem spoke about when it points out that Hashem appeared to Mamre, right? To Avram and Elonei Mamre, because Mamre gave him the Eitzah, he advised him to do the Bris Milah, right? It's a longer piece, but the bottom line is he says that Avram Avinu was being separated from his friends, from Aner, Eshkol, and Mamre. Mamre realized that Avram Avinu has to be separated for the good of all. And he supported Avram Avinu, and therefore he was zochet that the Shekhinah appeared to Avram in Mamre's backyard. That's why the Torah points it out there, Be'elonei Mamre. So he says, that's what Am Yisrael will be doing in the future to an even greater extent to bring the nations close. V'chein havdolas haLeviim miYisrael. The Leviim were separated from Am Yisrael, not that they should be somehow this separate caste that doesn't have anything to do with Am Yisrael. Or this he says, because after Chet HaEgel, Yisrael needed the Leviim to help them, number one, with Sur Meirah, to stay away from negative things, that they should have the koach to stand up against Ra, which he says, Kimat ein ze b'teva enoshi. That requires superhuman strength. Chazal themselves said, Imen HaKadosh Baruch Hu ozro en yocholo. Without HaKadosh Baruch Hu's help, we can't defeat the Yetzer Hara. And they needed help from the Leviim for dveikus to Hashem, to have fiery dveikus, and that was achieved by the Leviim with their avoda of shir, of the song. That the essence of the song of the Leviim was to enable a person to feel dveikus of the nefesh to Hashem. The Kohanim are between the Leviim and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what we see in Parshas Behaaloscha. The Leviim are given to the Kohanim. Okay, but that means that by the Leviim being given to assist the Kohanim are elevating the Leviim. That enables the Leviim to elevate Yisrael. That enables Yisrael to elevate the nations of the world, and so the chain goes. Okay, now, he says the Leviim, in their task of Sur Meirah, so of protecting Am Yisrael from the negative, so we see the three levels of Kahos, Gershon, and Merari. He says the first level is one of Vayigba Libo B'darchei Hashem, right? He says that a person who's on the highest level, like that level of Torah, that level of Kahos, so the very idea of doing something wrong is foreign to him, is there. The next level, Gershon, he says that's a person who does have to somewhat do battle with negative things, but he's megarish them. He chases them away because he wouldn't want it to destroy the beauty of what he's involved in. Right? He said it's like a person who doesn't want to eat something he knows is going to make him sick. But Merari is the last because he has a battle. Right? He knows that there's a sweetness that the Yetzer Hara is offering him. He has to remind himself that the end of the Yetzer Hara's sweetness is bitter, and he has to struggle. So all of us go through different stages of those things, sometimes multiple times a day. There's sometimes multiple times where we're zoned in, like, no, of course not, I wouldn't want to do that. There are times when we're torn to do something, and the three families of the Leviim are giving us strength in all of those different ways. Okay, so that's why each one had. Now, don't think that they were that separated. Just like with the Shvatim that we said, Ish Kabir Chaso Berach Osom, right? Each one like his bracha, like each Shevet's bracha. Berach Osam, all the Shvatim got the brachas of all the Shvatim. Meaning one Shevet is the center of the bracha of, call it Naphtali, of Zrizus, of speed. But they all got it, just he's the center of it. So too here he says, all of the families of Levi had all of these brachas, right? V'kulam mishtamshim b'ruach HaKodesh hazeh inyan hashir. And all of this was transmitted together. Again, remember what he said. They all sang together. Even though they had different avodas in carrying the Mishkan, they sang together. Now we have musicians here, right? And the idea is that you can have three different songs combining together into one song. And the fact that they're different songs is what makes it beautiful. If everyone's playing the same note, it's boring, right? And so you have the harmony of the three families of Levi, which he says, which is able to raise them up in the right way. Okay, now, there's another last piece that I want to look at, which is in Parshas Behaaloscha again, where at the end of the dedication of Leviim, it tells us something strange. It says, "V'samchu b'nei Yisrael es yedehem al haLeviim." Okay, that b'nei Yisrael would then lay their hands upon the Leviim. So, as the Shem MiShmuel, he says that's kind of strange, because in all our pictures of this idea of smichas yodayim, of leaning on someone with your hands, It is a greater person, a more honorable person, who is giving right to the person who's on a lower level, like Moshe Rabbeinu to Yoshua. Vayismoch es yodav olav. Moshe Rabbeinu leaned his hands on them. Smichus dayonim, right? The elder dayonim. If a young man has been tested and prepared, so they give him what we call smicha, right? They're empowering him from there. After we spoke about how the Leviim are separated off from Am Yisrael, why have the tables turned now, and the Leviim and Am Yisrael being somech on the Leviim? Okay, so he explains like this. He says, it's true. The mission of the Leviim was to elevate Am Yisrael and to connect them to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And in order to do so, they had to take a special status. Now realize, until the Leviim were separated, there wasn't such a distinct group among them. And here the Leviim came and they were assigned to camp around the Mishkan. Right? The Leviim from 3 directions, Moshe and Aaron in the 4th direction. Am Yisrael had to step back from the Mishkan to give them their place. The Medrash in Parshas Bamidbar says that Am Yisrael did it with ayin tova. They did it with a good eye. There wasn't this feeling like, hey, why should they get to be close to the Mishkan and not us? Right? The famous word they say, right? Hashem, where it says he asked all the nations, he asked Bnei Yishmael, do you want the Torah? What's in it? Don't kill. So they said, why didn't he ask Am Yisrael to do something that was hard for them? He said he did. He told them you have to stay in place at Har Sinai and nobody can go close. That's very hard for Jews, right? You tell them this is where you have to be. So he said here they gave it to Leviim with ayin tova. Ayin tova, the idea of saying, I'm happy that you have achieved something, even though I can't achieve it. I'm happy that you're going ahead to do something special. Please, I'm stepping back. Take your place by the Mishkan. He said that is among the greatest of all the midos. And because they did that, therefore, he says, that in certain ways put them on a level above the Leviim, so that the Leviim needed to receive from them that power of ayin tova. Okay, so the midah of tovas ayin was coming out truly actively in Bnei Yisrael. In other words, it had actions. It wasn't just theoretical. They said, we're stepping back. We can't get that close to the Mishkan. The Leviim, part of their duty was to guard the Mishkan, right? For people that aren't supposed to be coming, they're coming, and they happily gave that to them. Therefore, hutzruchu ad Leviim l'smichas Yisrael. Therefore, the Leviim needed Am Yisrael to be somech on them. Just like Moshe Rabbeinu gave to Yoshua, and just like this, because this is the power of having a good eye and a good heart. Okay, so we see in Am Yisrael, everyone's giving to each other with their different specialties, and that makes the beautiful symphony. Have a wonderful evening. That's it.